and dramatizes the tension between the dictator and the oppressed. And what is interesting about it is that the musician, the main character, Taduno, a musician, an ordinary musician with his guitar, is able to terrify the whole institution of dictatorship. In fact, the military, the entire military establishment goes jittery anytime they hear the name of Taduno. And in the case of Season of Crimson Blossom, I am yet to see a novel that has challenged established tradition in northern Nigeria as it does. This is a story of a widow who has to redefine herself sexually and going against all that she has had to learn through her culture and religion. We are going to start with them reading from their works. We will have a feel of the works. After that, I'm going to have discussion with them. And I promise you I'm going to give enough time for you to ask questions. Thank you. So we start with Adam.
I'm not going to say anything, I'm just going to read, because that's what the Oga on top said. 295. She was still thinking of the Sharia's ruling on falsely accusing decent women of depravity when she reached the madrasa and found two groups of women. One was huddled over Maria, while she tried to interest them in wares from the huge bag beneath her desk. Makeup kits, perfume from Arabia, henna from India, bottled honey, and the usual variety of sex boosters and creams. Another group had formed at the back, clustered around Malama Umma, going over previous lessons under the guidance of the matron. Ustaz Noura was not in class, neither was his wife, Murja. Binta was enthralled by some of the wares on Maria's desk and reached for a jar of pure honey. When she asked if it was definitely pure, Maria scolded at her. Well, it isn't adulterated, if that's what you mean. The other women turned to her. Binta felt cowed by their attention. Well, you know, sometimes people do add sugar. Binta, keep my tin if you are not buying. Who are you to come here with accusations? Imagine the hyena calling a dog a savage, Maria hissed. That wasn't how Binta had imagined the scenario would play out. And before she could marshal her thoughts, Ladidi, the skinny woman, famed for her half-dozen divorces, and her children, fathered by as many men, waved her hand before her nose and cleared her throat. What is that god-awful smell? The women sniffed the air, and having failed to perceive it, they turned to Ladidi. After an appropriate interval in which Ladidi severed their attention, she made a declaration that stunned the entire class, including Malama Umma's earnest group devoted to the study of hadith at the rear. It is the smell of zina, wallahi. I could perceive it from anywhere. There is a fornicator in this class. And she spat and turned her back to the slimy mockers that slid suddenly down the wall. Who are you calling a fornicator, Ladidi? Are you making false accusations against me? Can you prove anything? Ladidi chuckled. Who mentioned your name? She hissed. But did they not say that a guilty person would sweat, even in the rain? I Banza. Binta put down the bottle of honey on the table, and in the heavy silence that followed, walked to her seat in the middle of the class. She sat down and bowed her head. But then Shafa'atu, The young bride, who was stationed just behind Binta and was queasy already with the burgeoning seed inside her, got up abruptly and knocked over her bag in the process. She gathered her books from the floor and, holding her hand over her mouth, hurried out of the class. Ladidi adjusted her hijab, spat on the floor, cast a sidelong glance at Binta, whose head was still bowed, and walked out of the class. 2 other women followed her. And then Malama Umma resumed her tutorials with a voice made unnecessarily loud as to take in the entire class, and with a fervor that was driven by restrained fury. Binta could hear her, but she was not listening. The words cascaded off her consciousness and registered only in the background of her thoughts. Her mind was numbed by the recollection of the silence that had accompanied her to her seat. Her vision was blurred by the film of tears that lingered in her eyes, because she could not let them run down her cheeks. She had no idea how long she sat like that, head bowed, tears imprisoned in her eyes, and a whistling silence in her mind. When she stood up, she became conscious of the abrupt silence around her. She picked up her bag and walked out with as much dignity as she could muster, her pace measured, her shoulders held straight, defiant even. But inside, she could feel the weight of her heart, and it felt so much heavier than she ever remembered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, Dafe.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to read a very short passage. I'm reading from page 2. It's a letter, and that's a letter that draws us into the heart of the story. 20th February 19-. Dear Taduno, I hope you're very well and that the country where you have found refuge is treating you kindly. I know you will wonder how I managed to get this letter across to you without an address. Well, all I can say is, where there is a will, there's always a way. At first, I did not want to write because I thought you deserve the opportunity to start life afresh and build new memories. But I must confess that ever since you left, life has been an unbearable torture for me. I have never stopped thinking about you, and I never will. Do you remember all the dreams we shared but never lived, the future we never realized? I remember. I have remembered every day since you left, but that's not why I write this letter. Forgive me if my letter disrupts the peace you must be enjoying now. Forgive me if it brings back all the bad memories you fled. Forgive me for this invasion of your new life. But I thought I would not be doing you any good by failing to inform you now of what may turn out to be a tragic discovery for you later. In time to come, should you yield to the pull of your roots, you may be returning home to unpleasant surprises. Since you left, very strange things have been happening in Nigeria, and Lagos particularly has changed in a way I cannot describe with words. I must confess, I don't know exactly what's going on. Nobody knows. All I can say is that things are changing drastically here, and the city of Lagos is not the same as we used to know it. This is why I thought I should write to encourage you to build a life elsewhere, knowing that very soon nothing may remain the same here. For me, I continue to hold on to old memories. They are all that will be left when there's nothing left. I pray earnestly that you find new memories to cherish. Look after yourself. Goodbye, Leila. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you have had a feel of the narrative. They are very well written books, very well written. And I would like to ask Odafe first. Incidentally, as the time I was called that I was going to host this panel was the first time I heard about you. And also, when I got your book, it would also be the first time I was seeing it. And immediately I started reading it, I couldn't drop it. And I said, where has this guy been all this while? I am very well acquainted with Nigerian writing, African writing, but I hadn't come across him. And of course, meeting you, I know that this is your first novel, but you had been doing some other things before now. What were you doing, and how did you come into writing? And I read that you have decided to write for life. Can you tell us about yourself and the inspiration for your writing?
Thank you very much, Sule. My story might not necessarily inspire the audience, because I'll be very honest. I'm a lazy writer. I've been a lazy writer most of my life. But having said that, I had passion for writing. And I would say it's that passion that sustained my art. Who gets a book deal at the age of 40-something, over 40? I'm an old man now. And I really admire younger writers who started very early in life. But I'm starting quite late. And maybe I'm a latecomer. Now, this festival means so much to me. I want to take you back memory lane. And for the first time in my life, I feel comfortable discussing this because of the premise and the importance of this festival. For me, I've tagged it consciously a festival of hope. And I say that because I'm sure most of you know River Niger Bridge. If you're traveling from Abuja to Lokoja. And I'm sure most of you know there are a lot of kids that sell around that place, that hawk around that place. I used to be one of them. For about 4 years, because my father decided to take me to live with a master, in quotes, I went through a very harrowing experience. And after school, I would have to go and hawk. And but that gave me a lot of freedom, because I would say I was a lucky kid, because I would sell my items so quickly, and I would use the rest time to wander the streets, escape from reality, fly on the wings of imagination, and try to capture a better place from my reality. So that time, I would say that was when I began to develop my art as a writer. I might not know it then, but I think I was writing my stories in my mind, filing them away in ageless order for the right time. So I call this festival a festival of hope, because I believe out there on the streets, we have abundant talent in those kids roaming the streets. They have a very human story to tell. They have creativity. So we need to look to the publishers here. We need to look, begin to talent hunt from that level. So from that point in my life, I began to develop my art. And I would write letters to my dad that were never delivered. And eventually, when I got back to living with my dad, there was a communication gap. I couldn't sit with him, or he couldn't sit with me, rather, to discuss with me. So if I have any request to make, I'll write a letter and give it to him. So that's my way of communicating with my father as a child. So, and when I decided that, look, I want to take up writing as a vocation quite early, he did not support me. But he was grooming me unconsciously, because we don't communicate sitting down father to son. So I'll put all my requests or all my thoughts down in writing to him. So he was grooming me for a bigger. He's passed away now, and unfortunately, he never got to see me get published. So, that's my inspiration from a childhood of misery and suffering.
Thank you very much. And here we have a much, much younger writer whose first novel has just hit it. And he's enjoying the glitz and glamour of a great novelist. Yeah, Adam, I have taught your novel in 3 universities, and each time I go to class with your novel, we usually have very heated debates. And then I remember at Sulalamido University, a few persons sprang up and said they are ustaz, they can explain the Islamic dimension of these things. You know, for a woman to behave like this, you know, they have to explain the Islamic dimension. So I am fascinated by the way you have presented this woman, Binta, who is a widow, who meets this rascal in the street, and then falls in love. I mean, he jumps into her house. He boggles the house. He has come to steal things, and then they fall in love, and from there, she has to begin to live a different life entirely. The main character is a woman. There are other women characters that you have also handled quite impressively. The first question I would like to ask is, how close are you to your mother? Or aunties? Please. And then your inspiration, of course, for the novel.
Okay. I am very, very close to my mom. And we talk a lot about almost everything, I guess. Yeah, we talk about everything. And I have a lot of aunties, and they're all lovely, lovely people. And we talk about everything as well. So in terms of that, I have a very good relationship with the women who matter in my life. I don't know how relevant that is to this story anyway, but yeah, I have a healthy relationship with my parents and my aunties. I don't know, these debates, they interest me. I would like to know what your
First of all, tell us your inspiration. When did you conceive this story, and when did you bring it to life?
The inspiration for the story itself. That's kind of fascinating, because for me the story started where it started exactly in the book, with Reza jumping over Binta's fence. And it was a vision I kept having recurrently, and I wondered, what's up with these two characters? Who is this guy jumping over this woman's fence, and who is the woman whose house is being boggled? And I decided to follow the characters and write about them, and all these issues came up, the desire, the sex, the other things that we don't want to mention, the violence in Jos, of course, and that was very deliberate to me, because I was born in Jos, I lived in Jos. And I went through that period of crisis between 2001 and 2000. I left in 2009. So I was there all through all this, and I saw all of it, and I saw the damage it was doing to people. And we had this really fascinating reading group back then in Jos. Every 2 weeks we had readings, and we had discussions about it. But then every time there's a riot, you have to put life on hold. You have to go through the process of the curfew and all of it. And then there's a recovery period, and then months later you reschedule a meeting and people come back. And they always come back with stories about, how these people came and burnt down our house, and how these people... And I'm like, that is not the narrative I want to hear. I mean, we are witnesses to all these things. What happens to the people who are left behind? Those who lose their loved ones, their breadwinners, their parents, their brothers. How do they cope with all this grief, What happens to their life? And for me, that was very important, So Binta, as a widow, with strong ties to Jos, where she lost her husband, was a very prominent character for me, as well as Faiza, for instance, who had to go through this process of grieving and trauma without people who are around her understanding what she's going through. Because her attitude to trauma has been that of denying it, essentially, to say, oh no, it's everyone has gone through this, you just man up and just face it. Which, in a way, it's very damaging, and it's a process that I'm afraid is going to reoccur with the crisis in the Northeast, for instance. You have thousands of children who have been orphaned by violence, who have seen their parents killed, who have, witnessed all these things, and no one is addressing this issue. And all we're talking about is, they are hungry, let's give them food, let's give them blanket, and we think that is all. In the next 10, 15 years, when they come of age, probably these things will resurface, and who knows what they are going to become. So essentially, it's a time bomb. So for me, the inspiration about writing about trauma, about memory, about all of this thing is that we engage with them and interrogate ourselves and interrogate these issues and see what we can do about them. And I'm happy that the book has generated a lot of discussions and people are talking about trauma now. And people are willing to admit that, well, not every symptom of trauma is demonic possession or something that you need to call the imam to come with his wooden shoe and beat the devil away or something like that,
Right, thank you. Of course, your portrayal of Faiza, the little girl who literally has to live with her trauma, it's quite interesting, And I also see that you are not interested in portraying the physical violence, but the psychological violence, Before we return to the debate, let's go back to Odafe. Your narrative is allegorical, and we have this nearly larger-than-life character whose song moves everybody in the society. I would like to think that did you get this from a kind of a myth or a kind of a legend or a kind of a story you listened to, you had when you were young? Or it's something that you created, as a metaphor for resistance on your own?
First, I would like to say the style, my style, I write fable. And I think I'm a dreamer, let me put it that way. So I've developed this style over the years to write stories like allegory. My second book coming out is I employ the same style to deliver the story. Now, but what inspired the story is the fact that at some point I sat back and I realized that we are not exploring the power of the arts enough. I realized that the arts has the power to advance society in a way that's unbelievable. And I'm an ardent fan of Fela Kuti, and I realized that what this man did with music was awesome. Many years after he has gone, many of the ills, corruption, impunity, are still plaguing our society, tyranny. So I thought that I should write a story, a fable-like story that would represent that time in our history when music was a weapon against tyranny, when music was used as a weapon against tyranny. And one man wielded a weapon that was bigger than the weapon of the tyrant. And that man was Fela Kuti. So he inspired the story. Now, we have Fela Kuti the man and Fela Kuti the musician. So I used what he did with music. I took the character of Fela Kuti the musician to create my character. So it's like a model for my character, Taduno. And basically, I try to replicate his struggles against the regime, against oppression in society, to develop the story. And it also occurred to me that the tyrant loves violence. They would like for us to go into the street to protest, to revolt, and mow people down, carelessly. So, but when you are peaceful, I think that terrifies them because they don't know your the inner workings of your mind, And I realized that Fela Kuti, in spite of the vibe of his music, the strong vibes, the energy that runs through his work, he's a very peaceful man. He never advocated for violence. He says the truth the way it is. So I thought that we should revisit that part of our history and try to explore more, try to use the arts more to elevate our struggles as a people.
All right, thank you. I certainly, when I was reading your book, I remembered the 90s, the 80s and 90s, when reggae music was quite anti-establishment. We had great musicians like Maxwell Udo, Raskumunu, the reggae musicians, the Wailers, most of them. And of course, you can see that in our society today, such musicians are not, we can't find them anymore. But of course, one other thing that that bothers me is beyond presenting a character who, is able to resist power. Shouldn't there be a need for a revolution? Getting to that point where he's able to terrify the establishment, and he gets to a point where he is supposed to lead the fight to kick the tyrant out, but the tyrant keeps using a lot of power, and then eventually he gets shot. So your novel stops short of revolution, and is that what you mean by you are not advocating for violence? You don't want a revolution, and you don't think a revolution is needed in such a repressive society?
I don't think violence is the answer to our struggles. I think peaceful agitation is more like it. Violence, the dictator is a very violent person. Let's not forget that. So if it's like he wants us to respond in like manner, and that's when you give him more power. But when you approach, it's like, it's just, I think it's a human law. Somebody is aggressive towards you, and you take a peaceful disposition, but you assert yourself without being violent, you would overcome. But when you degenerate to the level of violence of the opponent, you are giving them a field day. So, and like I said, it's a message of hope. It tells the dictator that, look, whatever you do, you can't win against the people. So we don't necessarily have to take up arms, to fight the dictator in his own way.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Adam.
Can I just say something before you? I think a revolution is necessary. I strongly believe in that. But what kind of revolution are we talking about? And for me, it's the mental revolution that we need. We need to evolve, essentially, the way we think about things, about the society in general. These people we call tyrants, we call leaders, they emerge from amongst us. They are not foreigners. They are a product of the society one way or the other. And if they project all these bad qualities, you will always find a section of community that supports them. They can't do it without that kind of support. So when you have someone like Desiani, for instance, or what's this woman's name? Stella Odua, being accused of corruption, who comes out to defend her? Her people. And they say, oh no, it's because she's our tribeswoman. No, it's because she's a woman. We have all these things going on. For instance, and I've always talked about this, there was 99 when they had these crazy elections, and you had councillors collecting crazy amounts of money for doing absolutely nothing. And one of them in Jos was collecting, apart from his salary, his allowances, the bonuses, and everything else they were earning, and the corruption and bribery and whatever. And all of a sudden, the court ruled that the state governor has the power to terminate their tenures when they wanted to, and the governor decided to immediately terminate their tenures. So all of a sudden, they were out of jobs. And one of these councillors, his mother took stock, looked at his acquisition over a 2-year period, compared it with the acquisition of his colleagues, and they had more. They had more cars, they had bigger houses, they had more of everything. And she said, what were you doing when your colleagues were getting all those things? And he was like, our salary is not. And she said, no, you people are earning the same thing. So how come they have more than you? Is it that you are cursed, or you are the kind of person that they put in a barrel of oil and you come out dry? That is his mother speaking. So if he has another opportunity, what do you expect he would do? So unless the society or people in the society kind of have a mental revolution and say, we are going to hold ourselves as individuals accountable and perform our duties, our civic responsibilities diligently, we cannot even start to question the people in charge. Because once we start doing that, what do? They give us 5,000 naira, 2,000 naira. I was at Unity Fountain some time ago at the start of this, what was it called? The Bring Back Our Girls protest. We were there to demand that, okay, look, you need to pay attention to this issue. The government needs to address the situation. And what happened? Some women who were mothers came out and started protesting and started disrupting this peaceful process that is demanding that children should be brought back. And they got violence and started breaking chairs and trying to hit people. I lost faith that day. How much were they paid? 1,500 naira. And you look at the faces and you know they have children. So we need a revolution of the mind, yes.
All right, thank you, Abubakar. That is what I would want to see as being common to the two texts, the question of agency. In the case of Adam's book, the woman being in control of her own sexuality. She has met Reza, she has had sex with Reza, and she has discovered that the kind of sex she had with her husband, her late husband, is different from the one she has with Reza. With Reza, she's able to discover the rhythm of sex. Unlike the sex with her husband, where the light is off and then the man gets on top of her and then he gets away, and she is even asked that she should keep her legs up so that it will go directly to the womb, because sex is for procreation. So summarily, Binta discovers her sexuality, and indeed, from the narrative, she enjoys every bit of it. But the question is, are you trying to present a woman who has discovered something that she would hold on to, or this is a case of a woman who, because her husband is dead for quite a while, she gets into sexual act again, and she drifts to immorality. I've always had to argue that, well, it is not that she is immoral, it is just that she has discovered herself. But my students always remind me that, but when she is confronted, especially by her ustaz, we have rumors that you are having this with this guy, she immediately denies. If she wants to assert her sexuality, does she have to be denying that she is not having anything? So that is where the debate is, and I would like to hear your own side as the author.
When you started talking about sex, I scanned the audience to make sure that my mother is not here. And then as I opened my mouth to speak, I just saw her. So, okay, so the issue is this. For me, I was really interested in relationships between people. You know, so people tend to focus more on this sexual relationship between Binta and Reza. For me, there are other kinds of relationship in the book. Relationship between parents and their children, between husbands and their wives, between, you know, women in the community and men and lovers and all of that. So I was really interested in those kinds of relationship, and I wanted to explore all of them. I was also interested, and I've always been anyway, in the correlation of age and relationship. So in this society, it is very normal for a 55-year-old man to have a relationship with a 20-year-old woman. That is perfectly normal. Nobody talks about it, you know. But when the roles are reversed, when the woman is older, it's usually because she is promiscuous, or because she's immoral, or she's degenerate, or she's something negative. No one wants to consider why would a woman in that age who is living comfortably would want to engage in something like that. And that is why we have to go back and look at, okay, how did she live? She lived a life that was structured by society. And all through her life, from childhood to adulthood, she was totally compliant to the expectation of society. And the one moment she decided to say, I'm going to do this for me. A personal decision between two consenting adults becomes a communal issue. So for me, that was what I wanted to explore. That, yes, we have all these issues in society, and people tend to make it their business. Who is sleeping with who? Why are they sleeping? How are they doing it? It's a private thing between two people, right? But then it's a community affair. We have to make judgments. We have to pass edicts. We have to make proclamations, and we have to ostracize. And it is part of the hypocrisy of society. And I use this word deliberately because it is what is happening. Whatever Bukar Abba Ibrahim did, that is his personal business, right? But in a way, he's a public figure. And it goes out, and people say, oh, no, it's his private life, because he's a dude. If it had been the reverse, people would have stoned somebody. And we have this in the movie industry, right? With what's her name? Ramasado and all of that. Yeah? She's here? Yeah. Really? Okay. So we have that issue, you know. There were Alinuhu, Sane Denja, all of them, they did something similar. Nobody talked about it. Why the double standard? So for me, it's important that we interrogate ourselves and ask ourselves questions. People say, oh, no, it's not likely. Or, no, not it's not likely. That's why am I talking about this issue? But then again, you look at newspapers, and you get a lot of reports from northern Nigeria, from villages, from towns, from cities, of 60-year-old men, 70-year-old sometimes, who have 4 wives, raping girls who are 12 or 13 or younger. And they're reported in the newspapers, right? But because our mentality is not to engage with these things, we just read them and we say, Allah ya kyauta. We don't think of the consequence. We don't think of where this thing is coming from. And every day, if you open every single newspaper, you will find something like that. And it is in the north. And of course, we have this facade that we are a very religious and a very pious community. These things don't happen. They do. And we need to engage them and ask ourselves, why are these things happening? You know.
Thank you very much. Let me have a follow-up question to that. You said the relationship between two persons, especially of unequal age, is importantly explored. I want to ask you, did you have in mind Freudian idea of the Oedipus complex, where it is said that a boy tends to be closer to the mother, and the girl tends to be closer to the father? I ask because at every point in time, Binta sees Reza resembling her son. She often sees her son in him, and he also sees his mother in her. And yet they are able to comfortably have sexual intercourse.
Yes, I'm aware of the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex as well, which applies to women. It is not, I didn't want to go into that psychology per se. I wanted to give them something beyond the sex to hold on to. And so for Binta, yes, the sexual gratification was really important, but for her the most important thing was redeeming herself by redeeming Reza. Because she felt she failed with her son, so in a way, if she improves this guy's life, then it will kind of balance it out. But, you know, when you look at all these things, there are complexities. And they are aware of the complexities of these things. And several times in the novel, you have Reza saying, you are not my mother. Which means, yes, I do have this kind of thinking, but I'm very clear that we don't have this kind of blood relationship between us. So it's something that they're very conscious of, and it's something they're very clear about. But then again, when you look at the way our society is structured, in the North especially, it is common for cousins to marry. That is normal. In the East, it is an abomination. Right? So you can't have that kind of relationship. I read Tony Khan's novel, Carnivorous City, and you should read it too as well. It's a good book. Yeah? And I found the relationship weird. Like the relationship between a man and his younger brother's wife. And I'm like, yeah. I don't know how this relationship plays out that way, because I'm not from that part of the country. And I asked, and they say, oh, it's perfectly normal that a man is very comfortable with his younger brother's wife, which is something that will never happen in the North, right? It will be more acceptable for the woman to have a closer relationship with her husband's younger brother, not with his elder brother. So you have all these complexities in society, and you need to understand them before you even talk about this thing.
Thank you. Odafe, Taduno is a very strong character. And all through the novel, there is this tension that rages inside him. To choose between saving the people and saving his lover. Is that a way of saying that we have such distraction? Is it really a distraction? I mean, and eventually he is not able to even take a stand. Even at the end of the novel, when one expects him to, at a point he says, well, let her die, and then when the dictator, he gets him out of the country into a mental place, he comes back, he thinks that he has to fight to rescue his lover. What is this symbolism of a lover standing in your way when you want to be patriotic, when you want to perform some very important duty for your society?
It signifies our mental struggles, our emotional struggles, and even our physical struggles. Taduno is a man with blood running through his veins. So such decisions could never be easy for him to take. If I were to make it easy for him, I would be writing how do I put it, a flat story. But I wanted to write a story that people can really connect with. Because when you find yourself, no matter how much you love the people of your country, no matter how much you put into activism, you are torn between your family and your country. So you find yourself in a situation whereby you must make sacrifices. And it's not always easy. You agonize for days and weeks and months. And it also shows us the depth of his love for Lela, and it shows us his consciousness as an artist. Because as an artist, whatever you do, you must always put society first, at the risk of your own family. And we see that happening a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. And then the novel is about a song, it's about a musician. And of course, you come from the allegorical perspective, and we don't need to see any song written, or we don't need, towards the end of the novel, that single song that he drops, which is to encourage people even though he's going to die. I want to know, are you someone who have a lot of interest in song, in music?
I mean, music is very integral to our lives as human beings. I think we all sing every day, unconsciously. You might not realize it. You find yourself in the bathroom, you're humming something, maybe you get a piece of good news, you're singing in your heart. You might not, put out the words, you know, but you're singing, you know, and singing redefines us in a way, you know, internally, you know, it opens up a well of joy, of love inside of us. So, and you don't need to undertake a lengthy song to express your emotions. You could say it in one or two words. And that's what I try to do with the song at the end of the book. So I want to see this, like I said, the story is a story of hope. He was going to die. He knew he was going to die, but he left the people with a message of hope. You know, and I think music, the arts, you know, essentially gives mankind hope.
All right, thank you, Adam. I asked earlier whether you were close to your mother, and you didn't see the relevance. I was wondering. You are able to present these female characters quite well, and you know, the trend mostly in African literature is that women write more about women and issues that concern women. Is there any conscious intention, to transgress that notion that only women are able to portray the problems of women? Because you have been able to go into the mind of this character. Present a mind, a psyche that we find a woman who, with all her morality and religion, living such a very quiet and religious life, thinking of death, as it were, because she has no intention to marry, and she's going to the madrasa school. She wants to make up with her God so that she could die and make paradise. And then suddenly this guy appears in her life, and then we see the way the mind works for her. She is, even if she faces some disgrace in the public, we can see that she has a way of also resisting that shame or disgrace. So why do you focus on these women characters? And you earlier said that you wanted to show the relationship, especially to reverse the case of a male with a younger female, which is quite impressive. But I want you to talk about that. Did you, for instance, encounter any problem developing this character, Binta?
No, not really. Not really. I didn't want to particularly, or I didn't deliberately set out to focus on women. I think the female characters that have been conjuring seem to be more assertive at a particular point in time. So I found myself writing more about women than about men. And to be honest, I felt very uncomfortable, because I'm like, okay, the story, the lead character is a woman. The story, the voice is that of a female. Is there something I'm missing? Or, so eventually I have to ask myself, like, why do I keep writing from the female perspective? And I don't know, it's just the way the characters come to me. But essentially, for me, Binta came practically fully formed. And people have asked me, and they've asked me this very sneakily, in very different ways. And the most obvious way is like, oh, you write very convincingly about the sexuality of this 55-year-old. I'm curious, what kind of research did you conduct? The only research I needed to conduct was to converse with Binta. So I sort of embedded myself in this character, and I felt very, very connected to her. I felt every strand of emotion she felt, the anger, the hate, the passion, the desire, all of it. So I was able to kind of project that. And after writing it, I was a bit worried as well that maybe this angry feminist would think, why is this guy appropriating our voice and trying to speak for us? We can do it for ourselves. Yeah? And I said, well, Binta is a character and she has spoken for herself. So I'm just the vessel that was used to project this voice.
Thank you very much. As I promised you, we have about 25 minutes for the audience. So please, if you have any question or contributions, comments for these two writers. Yes, Kadaria. 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the lady there, yes. The lady there, 5. Where's the mic, please? Please bring it here first. Yes. We have 5 questions for now, for the first round. Please be brief and straight to the point.
Hi, my name is Kadria. I have a bit of a complaint, actually. I've just got your book, and I was looking forward to reading it, and then there's been a bit of a spoiler alert. Because, you've now told me the end of the book between the two of you, and I'm just, anyway. So my question is really for Adam. You talked about the hypocrisy in the North, particularly as it pertains to female sexuality, and how, even though we keep talking about religious basis for our values, and Islam we know, talks about women and men fornicating, getting the same punishment, but inevitably society punishes women. And yet, language is often an indicator of the sort of things that go on. And in Hausa, we have words like kwarto, we have words like daduro. These are things that seem to suggest that culturally we recognize the existence of affairs and people sort of going into marital homes and having sex with women that are not their women, or even the notion of living together and having sexual relationships when you're not officially married. So I'm just wondering, is it in the process of conducting research, is the existence of these words an indication that perhaps there was a freer time in our communities when, in some ways, the judgments were not this virulent? Because I remember growing up and watching Hausa plays where these Kwarto people who jump into women's houses were almost, they were romanticized almost, and they were funny, and people laughed about them, and we made jokes about them. And yet now it's a matter of life and death. So I'm just wondering whether, what your thoughts are on that seeming evolution. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very conscious of these words and how they apply. And for me, it was an indication that there has been this tradition of, if you like, call it infidelity, if you like, call it exploration, but there has been a tradition like that. And yes, it hasn't always ended well, to be honest, because I remember when I was doing a prelim program in law, and we had to do a lot of murder cases, and you discover that a lot of the cases from northern Nigeria and from Sudan were basically those of a man who kills another man because he was sleeping with his wife or something like that. So those were majority of the murder cases. So we've always had this tradition, right? But then we've had religious revivalism from the late 70s, 80s and 90s, and that has changed people's perception about these things. So people are more strict in judging people and how they interact, and there's mostly women, to be honest. The censorship has increased in that sense, and it's never been balanced, not even in terms of the morality or whatever. But if a man dies and the woman is around 40 or 50, the expectation is that her sexual needs have died with him. And it is normal for the children to expect their mother not to remarry or not to have a relationship with someone else. That is a normal expectation. And every time she thinks of marriage or someone proposes it, they'll be like, what do you need a man for? Right? But if it is a man 2 weeks after, if they wait that long, people will be like, even the women too will come to him. You need a woman to take care of the children. They are not referring to the children.
All right, thank you. Yeah, next person.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Solomon Sampson. I have a question for the two speakers, but the questions are going to be very personal about them as writers, not really concerning the books that they've written. Every writer has what gets him going. For example, some writers write under the influence of alcohol. Like the UK writer for children, Jacqueline Wilson, surrounds herself with childhood articles like anecdotes, rocking horses, and bicycles. Then we have people like Ernest Hemingway has to sharpen a dozen of pencils to get himself going. Now, as writers, what are your writing rituals? Then number two, that was the last question. When the speaker was talking, he said he connected his writing with his age. Now, the question is, does success in writing has any connection with age? Because one of the most celebrated writers we have in the world now, Toni Morrison, did not publish anything until she was about 40, when she made her debut with The Bullets Eye. Then the great American writer, Robert Frost, who made a mark by winning 4 Pulitzer Prizes, did not begin writing, did not publish anything until he was 39, when he published his first volume, A Boy's Will, after selling his farm in his native U.S. and moved to America. Thank you.
All right, Adam first, then he will take the 2 questions for him. Yeah.
Okay. Writerly influences. Yeah, some people enjoy alcohol, I'm sure. Some people enjoy weed. I write under the influence of words. I've never smoked, I've never drunk, and I've always been high. So I don't need anything else. Thank you. There was a second question, right? About age. Yeah. Just to add to that, I think there was a writer who signed a book deal recently, and I think she did it at the age of 80 something. Yeah. So age is not relevant, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
I beg to disagree that age is relevant. We have millions of writers in the world, and maybe you count a few that got a book deal at a very later stage of their lives. Well, I won't ask you to guess my age, but I'm an old man. So what I was trying to say in essence is like you could give up on your dream, you know? You keep writing and nothing is happening. You can give up. So not giving up is what I'm trying to address. You know, maybe that might inspire some people. Because I know of people, some of my friends that started writing, you know, they were aspiring writers like me. At the same, we started at the same time. But they've given up along the way because they just feel, it's too late. So I was just trying to tell you that it's never too late. Creativity is not something that can die with age. Now, that's your second question. I'll take the first. I write under the influence of society. You know, our society provides us all the material we need as artists. And if you are conscious, all you need to do is to be conscious to society. Some of us are very dead consciously to society. You know, so you see an injustice, you let it go. You see people suffering, you are immune. You're not bothered about your neighbor, about what's going on in your society. So but if we are conscious, if we connect to our society in a conscious way, we get inspiration. Like he said, I used to drink, I used to smoke, but I stopped. So when I write these days, maybe music elevates me.
Thank you. The third person, you will hold on while we get these 2 questions from the other hall. This question is to Abubakar. The question says, we live in a binary world, almost where it is either wrong or right. Did you suffer any criticism from your female friends for creating Binta? And then what are you working on next? What is your next book? briefly.
From the female, the only criticism I've had is, why is Reza the way Reza is? I mean, they love the guy, right? So they want to lynch me because of Reza. And I'm like, please, no, I'm not Reza. They know, obviously. I mean, but they like the guy so much that they hate me because of him. And I feel sorry for myself. Yeah. My next book, I don't know who asked the question, but if I tell you, I'll have to kill you for now. So but I'm writing, and I just finished the first draft, and we'll see how it goes. What's like?
Are you the one who asked the question? You want to talk about it?
No, I just finished. I'll go back to it and look at it and decide whether I should burn it or delete it.
Okay, obviously Adam doesn't want to talk about his second book. And here is a criticism for you. Why did you write about the bad side of the North? Are you going to write about the good side of the North? If not, we, the women of the North, deserve apology.
Why do I have a strong suspicion that Prof is fabricating that?
This is the question that came from the other hall.
Okay. Other hall, hi. I wrote about the North. I then set out to write about the bad side of the North. And when I wrote this book, I just wanted to create a mirror for the North, for Northerners to look and see themselves. That is the purpose of a mirror. So if you don't like what you see, and it is something that you can justify does not exist in this society, then by all means you have a case. But if you look at it critically and see that, yes, these things are justifiable, that these things do happen, even if you don't want to talk about them, then I think you need to change something. And then at the same time, I wanted to create a window for people to look in and see us the way we are, as beautiful as we are, with our colorful dresses, our very colorful ways of life, and our very colorful expressions. And then to see the words as well, and see that we are not perfect, we are humans. And for me, that is all.
Thank you very much. Yes, Richard.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Ali. I was very involved with our trauma. Following from Kadria's question, you know, when we were growing up, we had this idea of Bori and a more permissive culture in northern Nigeria. But your novel and his novel comes after the Civil War. And I've always wondered, when we study Nigerian literature in that period, if it's not symptomatic or symptomic of a sort of national trauma that we're undergoing in that period. You have the centrality of Jos, you have the centrality of a fella sort of figure. So to what extent are your novels about that sense of national trauma after the issues of 1967 to 1970? Thank you.
All right, Odafe first.
I'll say to a very great extent, our history cannot be pushed under the carpet. There's a need for us to revisit our history from time to time through various means, through the arts, through history itself. And that's the only way we can look at our past and recreate a future that's desirable. I think at that point, if you recollect, when Fela was still alive, fighting the regime with his music, very few people dare the military. And he was seen as a very strong and bold man. But even those of us that like his music, we listen maybe in the beer parlors, in the comfort of our homes, but we cannot come to the street to speak against the military openly. So you're correct to say we live in a post-traumatic experience of a military role. But having said that, it gives us the basis to elevate ourselves as a society through our arts.
Thank you very much. Adam?
Yeah, essentially I think there's no statistic to back this, but I think every single Nigerian has been traumatized one way or the other, because we've witnessed various kinds of violence, either domestically or, communally. Riots everywhere, those are common occurrences. And you read newspapers alone, those are traumatizing enough. Just reading the newspaper is traumatizing enough. Not even the violence, but the fact that someone can steal billions of naira. You just read the headlines and you feel traumatized. So we have all these traumas to deal with. And it would be hypocritical to say, oh, we are not doing poverty porn, so we are not talking about these things. But yes, they are there. I think the important thing is how we look at them artistically, instead of projecting them as a... You know how beggars do when they have limbs cut off? They just put it in your face so that you give them money, right? I mean, that is kind of gross. But there are subtler ways or more nuanced ways of projecting these things. And I think it's important that we engage with them. For me, the focus in the book is, yes, communal violence first, and then, the violence that our culture in a way inflicts on us and how it traumatizes us one way or the other.
Thank you. There's a lady over there. Please give her the mic. And that will be, I'm sorry, that might be the last question. But please, I want that lady to ask her question.
Good afternoon. My name is Hussein Asfian Ahmed. I'm going to ask a question to Sir Abubakar Adam Ibrahim. In the course of your discussion, you mentioned mental revolution. So in the course of reading books and since I was growing up, since my childhood stage, I discovered that in every country they have certain rules and regulations that give rules and regulations to each and every one of writers. There are things that even though you write about them, when you want to publish them, there will be censorship and there are particular ideas that will be screened out. So my question is, how do you tackle such challenges? Then to the other writer, Sir Odafe, I beg to disagree with you that, let me check the point. I beg to disagree with you that every artist should put into consideration his family and the society. I believe that as a writer, you are supposed to move away from conventions, because if you are to stick to conventions, it means you are not going to be pleasing the people. And you are not going to be expressing the ills of the society, but you are only going to be writing to gain money and you are only going to be writing for the government. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, please briefly. Ibrahim.
Thank you, Hussein, for kindly knighting both I and Odafe. Censorship is no matter how you look at it, right? Every society has its own form of censorship. Even the Western world. There are topics you can't write about. Write about homophobia, for instance, and they will lynch you, right? That is a form of censorship. And here you write about, the opposite, and you get lynched. You have, as a writer, to kind of have internal censorship as a mechanism to guide you. And you have to know who you are writing for and what you want to write about. Sometimes we want to write about things because we want to provoke people, and we think provoking them is the way of being. You become controversial, you become popular, And at the end of the day, what do you end up doing? You end up alienating the people you need to communicate with. There's a way you can tell someone, "Look, I think you are a fool," and he will say, "Oh, thank you very much," And there's a way you say, "Oh, I think you are a fool," and you get a beating. So there are two ways of looking at this, and I think you need to gauge yourself and address these things.
Dafe, you want to say a word?
Thank you for the comment, but I would also beg to disagree very, very strongly as a writer that you cannot dissociate yourself from your family and your society. It's not possible. These are your influences, So there's no way that you find yourself compromised as a writer. You say, as an artist, you say, "Oh, I want to dissociate myself from my family or my society. It's not possible. You have to get your inspiration, your support, and your ideas from them. So you cannot do that.
Thank you very much. Please, at this point, we will come to the end of this session. These are two writers that I can promise you, with my experience in literature, I can promise you that these writers will go to places. They will go to higher places. Odafe and Adam, they are writers. You have to watch out for their next books. And also, if you have not got their first books, please go and grab copies. Thank you very much. I feel privileged to host you. And thank you all.
Can we give them another round of applause, please? And just so you know, E.E. Sule's book is also in the bookstore, so make sure you buy it. We have the amazing Rahama Sadao in the house. The actress, very well known. How many of you